She's a fashion blogger, model, and entrepreneur.
She's amazing.
The latest tips on fashion, beauty, wellness, travel, and her lifestyle. And now, here's the founder and creator of Not Basic Blonde, Olasha.
Hi, Ron. Welcome to Not Basic Blonde podcast. How are you today?
I am great. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. You
Nice
have
to
to,
be on. I appreciate the invite to your show.
thank you so much. And you being incredible and successful in your career, being one of the most important stars in very important media outlets like Entrepreneur, Forbes, and others. We would love to know more about your career. How did you start and how it happened?
Wow, it's a big question. I appreciate that question. I don't know how it happened, to be honest with you. I am a big movie fan, and I would describe it this way. I tell people I'm a little bit of a Forrest Gump in that, Forrest had so many different jobs, and they just sort of stacked, on top of one another, and they led to other things that were incredible. I just feel like I'm very lucky in that way because I say yes to almost everything, and by doing that, I've been able to have some incredible experiences, whether that was writing with Forbes for a number of years or Entrepreneur Magazine, or independent media projects that I've been on and places that I've been able to visit. I mean, for me, it's been, you know what it is? I've always been curious. I just don't know. Maybe that email or that phone call or that person that chats with me in a coffee shop in some foreign city all of a sudden leads to something else. That's been my approach to it. And then foolishly, or maybe naively, I think of all the people I've interviewed, and I work really hard. I'm sure that there have been some failures on my side of it, but I work really hard to get to know them as if they are a dear friend or someone that could become a dear friend. And that's been, I think, beneficial and helpful in my path along the way. And really probably the reason why the publishers came to me and asked if I'd write a book on storytelling. So I'm hoping that it's because of that, because I've been able to I guess weave narratives from different areas around the world in ways that hopefully connect on a human level.
And that's amazing. And of course, building connections, it's everything. I always like that as well. If somebody reaching out to me and they're asking to meet or something, I always know that it will lead somewhere. So I always love to have many people in my network and
See, we're from the same
together.
island, as they say, right?
Yes.
It's a great. I think it's a great approach because you just never know. It's
Yeah.
funny because when it comes to other areas of our life, we're open to that, right? We're open to that when it comes to love and relationships or hobbies that we're passionate about. We're okay with that, but sometimes I think we don't allow that same sort of freedom to let life just happen in other areas and maybe professionally because we're worried that we can't control the outcome. Sometimes the messiness of life is the best part.
Yeah, that's so true. And of course, embrace messiness at any time. And always people ask me, how do you even interview people you never met them in your life? And you always connect with people you never met. It must be scary. And I'm always, it's not scary to me. It's totally normal. I connect with different people and network with different people, and it's always fun for me. But I guess some people hesitate to reach out to others, and that's why they have challenges with networking.
Or they stay in the same lane all the time, right?
So
Like
true.
they only talk with people that they work with or that are sort of have the same interest. I don't know about you, but I like to round myself out. Like in the beginning when I started interviewing people years ago, people would say, "Well, what? You're interviewing such like a variety of people. Why? Why don't you focus on one sector? Entertainment, education, innovation, whatever it is." And it was like, no, all of those other interviews and that story capture helps me be better at what I love to do, which is to find the story that maybe is hidden or that people don't talk about often in their lives. Because that to me is interesting. Like, I have a general rule. If someone reaches out to me and they'd like me to interview them and they send me like a press release or something, and that's really kind of what they want me to cover, I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that because anybody can search up that press release, right? But that's sort of where storytelling is right now. They're bullet points and that kind of a thing. It's like, no, I can find that out. I want to know about you, your background, your family, like what motivates you to get up in the morning, what keeps you from going to sleep at night, what haven't you done that you want to do, what's your relationship to success, and how has that changed over time? I mean, that to me is where we start to find the connection between people, because you say, oh wow, I've never met that individual, but I understand that feeling of being exhausted from anxiety, but also awake with one eye open because I don't want to miss something amidst the storm I'm in right now, right? Like that's a human experience.
And tell us more about your book. What was the
The
main idea, the takeaway,
takeaway. Well, hopefully there are lots of different takeaways.
and the takeaway for
um,
readers?
yeah. So look, I'd love it if people would. It's called The Narrative Edge: Authentic Storytelling That Meets the Moment. Wiley's the publisher. It hits, you can pre-order now. You can just go to my website at drrodberger.com/book, or search for it wherever you buy your books. I will tell you that when the publisher came to me, it's about a year ago, and asked if I would consider writing a book on storytelling, I said to them, maybe this was foolish at the time, but it was honest. It was, look, if you're looking for the 5 steps on how to tell a better story or something like that, like, I'm not your guy. That's not me. And they were like, no, you do you, which was awesome thing to hear, because it just meant that I had the freedom to think about storytelling within, I guess, or through the lens of my experience and the people that have influenced me around the world. And so probably the hardest part was in figuring that, like, okay, how do I want to structure this, right? And you know what? It sounds maybe too in the weeds, but the subtitle of the book really played a massive role. So when that meeting the moment element, I had been on stage with a friend of mine whose book came out, Jason Feltz. He was the one with Sir Richard Branson that built the Virgin Entertainment brand, and his book came out. And so I was a part of his book tour and interviewing him live on stage. And we kept going back and forth in this whole meeting the moment, right? And I just thought, gosh, between that and authenticity, and that's how I got to this authentic storytelling that meets the moment. But when I came up with that was really my North Star. And so what I decided was that I needed to incorporate my own experiences of story. In essence, you're not going to connect with me as a reader, whether you've met me or not, or are interested in people that I've interviewed or been around, if I can't be as human as the person that's turning the page or listening to the audiobook. And so the book is different in that it is not a how-to. But in the feedback I've gotten from people around the world that have read early copies of it, it's that it welcomed them in without overtly telling them, hey, share your story or think about yourself in this regard. Like, they felt themselves walking through their own memory bank of things that connected to either what I was sharing based on my experience through life, and or those stories that helped frame the way I look at life now. And so that's where I think everybody's experience is a little bit different based on their own stories and the way in which they were either told stories or were a part of stories. But I guess the main ethos is, look, if you're not in control of your story, who is? And while that may sound simple to some, I think if you really sit with that, it's compelling for people, because they might say they feel that they are in control of the story they tell professionally, or they feel that they are not in, let's say, their personal lives or at home or in their marriage or in whatever is going on. And they want to understand that. They want to, a lot of times I'll go back to like a school play, like a classic American school play in elementary school, where somebody has to play the oak tree. Somebody is the main character, right? Somebody's the villain or the protagonist. And understanding that sometimes in different chapters of our lives, we are playing a different role. And there's a reason for that. It allows us, if I'm the oak tree in the corner and I have no lines, I get a chance to sort of sit back and understand how story evolves around me. And then if the next chance comes and I play a different role, I'll be better prepared for that. But sometimes I think we overcomplicate life, and it's actually far simpler. So I hope people take a lot from it. I take you from, going to a summer camp in northern Michigan to meeting with the Pope, the late Pope Francis, to behind the scenes at Formula One, sitting with Magic Johnson. So I wanted every chapter to feel like you were going somewhere, and most likely multiple places within that chapter, whether it was yourself and or a destination.
This sounds very interesting. When is it coming out and when is it
Yeah,
ready?
so it hits bookstores in I think like a month from now in November, and you can pre-order it now, and I think it hits their doorstep like on November 18th. So it's and by the way, I've learned this through publishing. Pre-orders actually play a very big role. So it's not just writing the book, right, and having a publisher. It's all the things that sort of go with that. And now I'm planning an event launch and fundraiser around the book, and my friends at Charity Water, having Emmy Russell. She's the granddaughter of Loretta Lynn, the famous and iconic country singer who was an American Idol finalist. She's going to be there for the event. I'll be capturing her story on stage in front of everybody, and she'll perform as well. So it's a anybody who thinks they can write a book or want to write a book, it's a full-time gig once you get out of the gates. So you think it's the challenge is writing the book. I mean, that is a challenge for sure. But then there's everything in addition to that, because there's just so many books out there, and how do you sort of separate from the masses?
Oh, writing a book is definitely challenging. It's a lot of work and a lot of editing and all that. So it's definitely very hard work. Do you think it makes more sense to actually proceed with publisher or publish, like self-publish?
That is the big question, the self-publishing question. I don't know. I think it's unique for everybody. One of the main reasons that I was game to work with a main and notable publisher, I think Wiley's been around since like 1807. They're massive, and I think number two in business books in the world. But one of the reasons that I said yes to them was just because I had already been associated with, on different levels, these sort of iconic brands in publishing and or in, let's say, storytelling or news. If I had not done those, or that was not the path that I had taken, it probably would have been smarter to self-publish, because that industry has really matured over the last 5 years. And with a little bit of investment, you can get, I think even a decade ago, I'm trying to think back to one of the first times I had been contacted about potentially publishing. And it was a group that their whole thing was around, self-publishing, and they provided sort of all the support mechanisms and helped with distribution, your ISBN number and all these sorts of things. It still felt very murky. There wasn't sort of a clear path. And I have now, for people in researching for their own projects, gained a better understanding. And I think that if you're pretty savvy in marketing and you understand how to get stuff out there, it can be really valuable to self-publish. I also know plenty of people that they want to first get sort of a name publisher, right? And then if they do a second book, then they sort of rethink that, right? Like, I'm right now working on a thing with Wiley where we're talking about a companion guide to this book even before it comes out. So that's great news. But I don't know if I think it's unique for everybody. Like if you have a massive social following, like you have a great social following in what you do, right? You're very recognizable in what you do and the effort that you put in. I could argue that, someone like you would probably do better from a self-publishing. I don't know, right? Maybe I erred and should have done the self-publishing, but Wiley's been great. And so, it's worked well for me, but I don't think that it's a one size fits all approach for folks.
Yeah, it definitely depends on the book and author and other factors. So yeah. Just a second, let me go down the list to see
Sure.
what the questions. What inspired you to explore storytelling not just as an art, but as a tool for advancing agency and leadership?
Yeah, agency is probably the word that I'm going to hook into in that question. I appreciate that question. You know what? I said this in a recent interview, and it was the first time it kind of hit me. And I don't even think I don't recall that I even brought it up in the book. So I need to remember this because it's you learn about yourself, I think, through creative endeavors, and it's not that you all of a sudden there's an answer and it's done. It's like no, that answer sort of lives and grows and changes and morphs, right? When I was younger, my late father he was quite a bit older as a father, and he traveled. He was from Germany. He was not from the U.S. And so I can say this, but he had a very sort of what we might say is a typical sort of German personality. He was sort of very stoic, and there was a draft of cold air that would encircle him, right? Not the most emotive guy in that regard. But as a kid, when your parent came home from, let's say, a work trip, you'd want to go in and find out, tell me all about it. Because in my mind, as a young child, there was excitement and potential adventure I'm sure there was not really adventure, but it was in my mind. And yet he wouldn't really share because it wasn't interesting to him. He was just sort of a very get things done, cross it off a list and move on. And yet I'm wanting more. I'm wanting to know what he did. Where did he go? Who did he meet? Just tell me something. And so actually, I think he did me a great favor in the long run. I didn't know it then. But his lack of giving from a storytelling perspective just made me want it more, right? And we see this as human behavior, right? Sometimes you say, well, I don't know, should we, does a child need, how do we respond to a kid who says they want more candy or they want something, they found something they want to buy because they have to have it, their friends have it. I didn't have what I needed from a storytelling perspective, and I wanted it. I love that he traveled internationally. That was really compelling to me, which is probably one of the reasons why I love travel. There's an energy, there's a rhythm to travel for me that even if I'm standing in line waiting to board a plane and we're running late, whatever it is, like I know that rhythm, like it's comfortable to me. And I think a lot of that just originates from whatever I had contrived in my mind about my father's travels. And so that's really where it started for me. And I think growing up as a kid, I don't really care where you are in the world. It can be very confusing. It's hard to know what's real, what's not. You highly sensitive to everything around you. And oftentimes, especially in middle school and these sorts of things, or in your early teens, you have more questions than you have answers about your value and who values you and these sorts of things. And I think developing that agency through story and the role that you might play can help get you to that next day. And through that next day, you learn and you grow and you gain some wisdom. So that's just sort of always been my approach. And I'll say this to put a bow on this question. I'm a huge sports fan, and we're right now during the Major League Baseball playoffs. I didn't play baseball, but I follow it because I follow every sport I can. And I think of it like this. I think about at-bats. Like, there are plenty of times in my past where, and I would think listeners and viewers of your show, you don't have to be a public speaker like me or do things in sort of the public realm. There are plenty of times where you have that moment of, I've got to be on tomorrow, or I have an interview for a school or a job, or I have to go talk to my boss, or whatever it is. You feel like you have to be on, and you almost stress about just that process leading up to that event than you do even the event itself or that moment in time. And I think that thinking about it from an at-bat, like every one of these experiences I've had in storytelling, it's another at-bat, right? I mean, I remember sitting with Magic Johnson and thinking, this is just another at-bat. I have to think of it that way because this will help me. If I can just think about it that way, I can swing and miss at the proverbial ball, but I'm still at the plate. Like I'm still having an at-bat, right? And so I'm active. I'm not shirking from the moment. I'm not shying away from it. I'm embracing it. Sort of whatever happens, but I'm here. I'm swinging at it, And so that has really helped me in moments where I think, what question am I going to ask? Like, what am I going to do? Or, oh my gosh, I had no idea I was going to interview this person, right? Like when I got a chance to interview Charles Barkley, I had no idea that day I was interviewing Charles Barkley. I had like a 3-hour notice and it was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Right. As a massive basketball fan, and he's iconic during the era that I grew up. How do I separate my excitement, my emotion from like, I just want to have a good conversation with the guy. But it's those at bats.
That's incredible. And also, you interviewed so many celebrities. Tell us about the experience and what was the turning point? What was the challenging part?
What was the challenging part of the turning point of interviewing celebrities? You know what? I know this sounds like, come on, right? It's probably that I didn't think of them in that light, like in essence that they were a celebrity or the celebrity. Because I find it's far easier. Like when people ask me for advice on how to interview or to sort of partake in some of these activities, I think the quicker you can get to the point where You're curious about the things that you can't see on Instagram. You're curious about the things that you can't read in the headlines or see on TV about that person or on the big screen. The faster you're going to be at getting to a place where they just connect with you. Because if you play the odds and the numbers, these people have been interviewed by thousands of people, or they've had whatever it is, right? Just numerous ongoing interviews and experiences like this. So give them a different experience, right? Find that nugget of something that is different or interesting. Then you see like a really cool side of them. So I told myself that early on. It was like, okay, I have I got to think about this in a different way, you know, because I don't want to just be like everybody else. And it's not that that's the objective. Like I'm going to be different than anybody that's interviewed this individual or talked to them. It's just, it's really about putting myself in the best place possible so that I can be who I think I am if I am if I am authentic. Like that then means I can capture a story. And to be okay with not knowing what that story is. Like I don't ever pursue and go, this is what I'm going to talk about. You know, I'm a kid of the Star Wars era and the great scene, you know, where it's like, just trust the Force, Luke, you know, like sometimes in life, you just have to trust that it will reveal itself. Like people have talked about like film strip, like the film is sort of crossing your forehead or your mind's eye. Can you slow that film strip down enough in real time to recognize, aha, that's the hook. That's the interesting thing, right? That's the part that, wait a minute, I didn't anticipate that answer, or I didn't, right? That experience from the audience. Maybe I need to lean into that. There's something about the energy today in this moment in front of this individual or audience that requires that I pause for a second, stop the elevator between two floors and peer into both floors, see what I'm missing or what's there.
Sure, it's like you can have a list of questions, but also it depends on how it flows, and you would like to get more information and get curious about other things. So you definitely want to ask more questions and other questions.
That's right. I mean, think about it. It's so interesting when people talk about, you know, this is actually, I think, it could become a golden era of storytelling because I think people are looking for authentic human experiences now in a world that is ever synthetic, driven by AI. You know, it's like, well, you know, people who say, like, well, I don't really think about story. No, you do. Everybody thinks about it every day. They just don't even realize it, right? And I say this, but it's like, you know, you get pulled over today for speeding. The first thing you're going to think about while that cop is pulling up and walking up to your driver's side of the car is, what's my story? You go on a first date or a blind date, or you go to a conference and you don't know anybody, whatever that is. You go into a business meeting, you're making a pitch. What's my story? Right. And a lot of times, especially in those instances where you're trying to create connection, not that it's a forced connection because you're being pulled over for speeding, but you're on a first date, a blind date, or you're trying to win business or these sorts of things. Where does the connection come from? It doesn't come from the list of questions when you say, I need to make sure that this man or woman has this background, or they sort of check these boxes, or that this company has these benefits. It's in the sort of side conversations, right? It's in the nonverbals, right? It's the way in which you connect over ordering the same kind of glass of wine or coffee drink that you didn't realize someone else liked it that way, right? That's where you get connection. And so I think it's all around us. And this is a great time to really identify, I think, and highlight that story is absolutely part of everything we do. It's nice to have. It's not an add-on. It's a part of everything we do. If a kid takes the cookie out of the cookie jar, right? It's like, the kid's caught. What do they think about? Even at a young age, what's my story? Yeah, it might be a very simple response, like, I didn't do it. They've got like chocolate on their face, right? But they understand that exchange, right? They're asked a question, and what's the response? I have to have a story.
It's even for every brand has their story behind it. Every entrepreneur has a story behind it, but
And if they
some
don't, they suffer, right? If they don't have a
definitely.
story that connects with their consumers or shows that they are aware of sort of the time and space that they share with that consumer, then
Yeah.
if they don't do that, they're dead in the water, and they come across or they run the risk of being tone deaf to the market, right? And that's always dangerous because it's like they don't get it. They don't understand.
Yeah, so true. But how to actually define your story? I know for some people it's challenging to identify their story, to kind of built on from there. And yeah,
Yeah, so the origin story or one's origin story.
yes.
It's interesting because you're exactly right. I think people do struggle with that, but I don't think it's because they can't identify the elements. If we sort of think of like characters and scenes, right, and adventure, whatever it is, it's because we fear that whatever what we're going to put forth in that story isn't valued, or it's not valued as much as maybe we think it should be, or that we're not going to get it's about fearing rejection, right? And it's like, actually, I mean, this is why. Like, I guess lectured at Vanderbilt University's business school for many years, and so many of these young people, so well intended, and I really enjoyed working with so many of them. But when one thing I would ask, I'd always want their resume before I got a chance to work with them. I just wanted to see what, right? They would always, it's like in journalism, bury the lead, right? Everything looked the same. They had their grade point averages were great. Their undergraduate degrees were interesting, whatever. But there was nothing that separated them other than their name and maybe where they grew up. In their, it's like, oh, they're from Virginia or they're from New York or whatever it is. There was nothing interesting there. It only was when I started digging sort of at the bottom of the resume to understand really who they were, that I could understand who they are or they want to be. And so I think a lot of that is we don't share it because we think, oh, who wants to know about that summer job I took? Or that my family didn't have a lot of resources, so I had to work 2 jobs in the summer and smile about it so that I could still partake in whatever these other activities are and join my friends or colleagues. It's like, no, that's why you're going to get hired, right? Because you have some semblance of grit and determination and persistence, and there's a loyalty sort of gene in you. Those are all great qualities. Just to know that you're doing the exact same thing as everybody else in your cohort, that's boring. That's why hiring managers, it doesn't matter the sector. A lot of times they're going to hire the person that they think is going to get along with the very people they're going to have to get along with. Right? Like socially, do they fit? Do they fit our culture? It means so much, right? I mean, we can train a lot of people about a lot of things, but you can't, it's hard to train personality or to reform personality in that regard. And that's why it's easy to spot when they don't fit. You're like, I don't think this is going to fit the story or the narrative that we have at this firm or at this company. And so they keep looking, right? And so I think origin stories are tough for people, but it's not because we don't think we have enough to put out there. It's that we fear that rejection, and that first sign of rejection, no, we're like turtles. We put our head back in and we say, nope, not going to share.
So true. And our story is what defines us, and that's what gave us the background and everything to start a career or to become who we are today. So it's very important to share your story. And when I shared mine and others, because I attend so many conferences and people always share their story, and this is what happened to me, and this is why it led me to this moment. So it's your story is everything.
It's everything. It's your calling card, right? It's at
Yeah.
some point you have to go beyond your LinkedIn or your Instagram profile or your own website. Like people, they want to know, right? And they also want to know, does it map to really who you are? Like what I see publicly, is that the person when I meet them? And I think that's really key. That's important. Like to this day, I always love when I get on a Zoom or I meet people in person who I've only seen, let's say, their avatar or their headshot, and they actually look like the image that they have publicly. And I'm like, well, that's so refreshing, because a lot of times people don't, and you think, well, they're doing that because they want to, obviously. And I don't blame people. I think we all want to put our best sort of foot or face forward. Um, but that can also send a message that an unintended message to the audience or whoever you're going to be chatting with about what you value and why, right?
So true. What do you think is the power of the story? Well, we kind of mentioned it, but just to add to it.
The power of story. The irony is, I think that if we put ourselves out there, right, and we say, look, my origin story or whatever story I should be telling or have an opportunity to tell, even if it doesn't land, you know what? Selfishly, I'm going to learn something about myself in sharing that story. I really am. And I think that if I do that, you never know the impact that can have on those around you, right? There's so many people that that maybe aren't as sort of, again, public facing or extroverted where they feel comfortable in sharing their story. That doesn't mean they don't have a story. They probably have an incredibly valuable and compelling story. And so a lot of those people are fantastic at being sort of sponges and soaking up the stories around them. And I find those people fascinating because if you slow down time and you actually sit down and spend time with them, there's just such wonderful things that come out, right? And to me, that's the power of story. That story isn't just about what's presented to us in a moment. Like you and I are living a story right now. Like we are living right now as a part of a story where we have met up and we're sharing. That to me is interesting because that's going to inform my next conversation, whether that's being recorded or not, or if I'm at the grocery store. Like these things all, I think they all fit together. It's not modular. It's not something you just put on a bookshelf. And so the power of story connects. It's like, I'll tell you, I was in Oslo. No, I'm sorry. I was in Stockholm. I don't know, 8 weeks ago. And I was there for speaking and some other things. And I remember getting back into my room one night and it was exhausting. It's one of these things when you travel and it's just sort of like, 4 or 5 days in, you start to feel the weight of just this, the engine that is travel and working through travel. And I was getting ready for bed and I saw my phone sort of light up or whatever. And I got this message on Facebook from a guy that I had gone to school with, grew up, right? And we weren't close, but we knew of each other and we were Facebook friends. And everybody has these sort of folks, right? It wasn't that we hung out and all of that, but you sort of celebrate their wins and these sorts of things. And that can be, I think, a benefit to social media when there are lots of downsides, but this is an upside. And he's just sent me this instant message about how he had been watching what I've been doing. And he was so curious as to where I had gotten this perceived level of self-confidence in myself to do the things that I've done, because he was grappling with and sort of wrestling with his own identity around sort of self-confidence and what he should be doing in his 40s. And man, I was so honored to receive that message, because that took a lot. It made me think back to when have I reached out to people blindly like that and just shared an observation, in essence, letting them know that while they're public or they're doing things, that there are those of us that are watching and following and getting inspiration, and or just building up an awareness that maybe I need to ask myself some key questions because I'm seeing some other people in ways that maybe they're doing it and navigating it in a way that I can learn from, right? And so that to me was really powerful. That to me is the power of story, that through all of that, and I applaud him for that. And we had a nice exchange about it afterwards, because I don't have the answers. I'm endlessly looking for the answers. I don't even know what the questions are sometimes, or half the time. But I do know that if I'm allowing myself to feel and be a part of it, I at least can lay down at night and go, wow, I've experienced a full spectrum of emotions of what it means to be human. And some of it has not been good, but then some of it's been fantastic. And so at least I can say that I can punch my ticket. Like, I clocked in, right? I was willing to be a part of that arena in that way. So I think the power of story is all around us. That's why we love music. It's why we love movies, right? Why is it that when you're a kid and someone breaks up with you, or someone steals, quote, the girl that you'd like to ask out or whatever, what do? You listen to music because you have no words for how you're feeling, but somehow this band, this solo artist, this duo has some words together with sound that makes you say, oh, they get it. And I just want to sit in this hot tub of emotional mess, right? And that to me is so powerful. That's why we love story.
So true. How does your choose your own adventure approach to the book help readers from different backgrounds engage with and apply a storytelling framework?
Great question. I loved choose your own adventure books when I was a kid. For whatever reason, those books told me that you know what it really was? It wasn't that there was a right or wrong way to read a book. I could turn to page 52 if I wanted to see what happened to the guy that was diving in an underwater cave, or I could go to page 75 and learn what happens if he chooses to climb a mountain. And there was something that created a sense of agency in my experience of reading through those kinds of books. And so when I wrote this book, and you asked me earlier, sort of, how did it get put together, basically, it's funny because I'll bring music back. I'm not a musician. I love music. When I write, little secret here, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, but I listen to movie scores. I love movie scores when I write. Interstellar, one of the best movie scores. I love listening to that when I write. Shawshank, American Beauty, Road to Perdition, like some of these great ones. Finding Nemo is a great score as well. But what I did was I said to myself, I want someone to be able to pick my book up and for whatever reason, just maybe start with chapter 5 or start with chapter 2. Read the introduction and say, I want to read the last chapter. And so I treated it, I didn't know this when I was doing it, but then quite quickly it resonated with me that it was a little bit like an old school album, like a side A and a side B of an album. And so I wanted thematically, like if you pick up an old album, right, you kind of go, wow, this is so-and-so's, latest album, and it's like, describe it to me, Rod. Well, here's a sensibility of this album, right? Or this is what this artist was going through, and hence it's darker, or it's slower, or it's more, whatever it is. That's what I wanted for the book. I wanted people to say, in isolation, I could just read this one chapter, but understand that thematically it does connect to the whole book. That was important to me because I think story is messy. I don't think it's organized as much as we would like it to be. That's just our inclination to organize. We feel better when we do that. That's why we have spring cleaning. That's why we start anew on January 1 and say we're going to lose weight or lift more weights or be better financially, whatever it is, right? Or every start of a school year, your folder as a young kid, you think, okay, it's going to be organized this year. And by Halloween, it's a mess. So life is messy in that way. And I wanted the book to feel a little bit like an album in that way, where you didn't have to necessarily read in sequential order. You can, but you didn't have to, because those stories and hopefully the lessons from them for myself and maybe for the reader will be valued within the context of those pages.
I like that because sometimes when I read the book, I like to go back to some of the moments that I liked and just go back to them. But also when it's structured, it's kind of different. But when it's like stories are different chapters as well, it's interesting.
Yeah, because they hit you differently, right? So
Yeah.
and I tried in every chapter, it's different. Like I share my own experience through story in different ways. In one chapter, you read a scene out of Nazi Germany based on a story I was told from my late father, right? In another scene, you hear me giving the eulogy of a family member that died very young, and I was graveside giving that as storm clouds. And you never know, someone may have experienced death in a certain way of a family member, and that hits them, and they go, I never thought about story in ways in which we have to convey emotion, respect, legacy, community, all in one, right, experience. So I wanted it to be that way. I did not want it to be this sort of formulaic, right? I mean, what is formulaic? Nothing is formulaic. Love isn't. Like sport, nothing is formulaic, right? I mean, everything changes based on different variables that come in, right? Different people, different times of year, weather, all kinds of stuff. So hopefully it's a beautiful mess in that regard.
When you write for the Forbes or Entrepreneur, what kind of stories you're looking for the most, and what kind of stories catch your attention?
So when I did that kind of writing, I would say what I would do is I would challenge myself to find, like, this goes back to that press release sort of rule I have. I would always be curious about the story that wasn't in the press release. That was my main focus. And I would challenge myself because I would have friends that would say to me, oh gosh, does it, maybe they would be attracted to sort of people that were publicly interesting or whatever you would call that, more celebrity focused, or have some level of notoriety. And that maybe interviewing, let's say an investor that's not known is maybe less exciting or enticing. But early on, I really focused on, no, they're all interesting. like incredibly interesting. And so if I'm going to honor if I'm going to honor my own time by sitting down with them, let alone their own time, then I think I owe it to them to be a bit of a detective, right? A treasure hunter to see, like, okay, maybe you're not telling me, maybe people don't know how amazing you are, but I want to figure it out. I want to find out. Excuse me, I'm getting choked up over it. But it's like everybody has something that they're contributing that's interesting or different. And if I can find that, then you know what? They haven't experienced, they remember me. And that's why I've developed a lot of friendships from the people that I met just through Zoom or just sitting down at a conference or a coffee shop or, at a refugee camp in Africa. I think taking that approach has been very, very helpful. And probably the hardest thing when it comes to that type of writing are all the PR professionals and publicists that have the unenviable job, and so many of them are either losing their jobs or that industry is changing dramatically because of AI and other things. Is that they're trying to force a story that maybe isn't there, and that to me, that was always excuse me, the most challenging was that just because they had a client that thought they had a story doesn't mean they have a story. And so can we find the story, right? Because there is always, I think, a story. It may not be the most compelling at that point in time, but it doesn't mean that their story isn't valuable in their contribution. So and outside of a handful, I mean a very small amount, I typically was able to find what that was, right? That was always my goal. I just honor their experience and try to find out what might be a unique angle for them.
It's definitely easy to just go by the list of the question and kind of interview someone, but you go actually deeper and you have a talent for finding story from outside of the box. Like you're actually thinking outside of the box and finding the story that no one would even think they actually have. Kind of, you're thinking way beyond and going deeper into the story, like you mentioned. So,
I try to. I will say that. I mean, look, I have my doctorate in clinical psychology, so in my old world professionally, I had experiences where I had to ask people some pretty tough questions about self harm, about abuse, about these dark secrets that they didn't want to share with anybody other than me or other practitioners or people that they worked with. And so I think those experiences, I developed a different relationship to boundaries, not in an unhealthy way, just meaning that as humans, it's very easy to say, well, I sensed something, but I didn't go there, whatever that means, right? Like I didn't ask a question because I didn't think it was right, or maybe I wasn't equipped to handle what the potential response would be. When I think you get over that fear, it allows you to see into somebody in a way to engage that says, I'm safe, right? And in essence, you're in control of your story. So it's not that you're just going to all of a sudden open the vault and share things that you don't want to share, but you might be much more open to providing color and context to the stories that you do share because it doesn't feel so rigid, that we're just sort of marching along and someone's asking the questions and they're answering it and they're just going back and forth to the questions or the responses that they're used to doing. Like I will tell you, it's never a goal of mine, but it's always a nice thing. Someone says like, well, what do you get out of it? Right? We always feel like we have to get something out of it, what we do. When someone says to me, I've never been asked that before. In my head, I just go, okay. Like that feels good because it means that I didn't censor myself, right? It means that I have honored their experience in a way where I took the time to say, no, wait a minute, hold on a second in my head. I want to ask a follow-up to that. Or I want to, now I do want to ask a question about being a parent or losing a job or a business or a dream, and seeing how they respond to that. So that's always my, you don't get paid by someone telling you that, but boy, it does sort of pay the spirit or the sensibility that you have as a human and the value you provide if you can ask something that makes somebody think, and it's a good thing, right? That it's not they've never been asked it because it's negative or pejorative. It's just that they hadn't contemplated it that way, and you've added to that. They're probably going to think about that later after the interview.
I do get that a lot on my podcast because I do ask people questions that I'm interested in to know about them because I see them from different perspectives. I see them from social media and other things, but
Yeah.
also I like to know how did they accomplish it or other things. And they always ask me, "Oh, I never been asked this."
It's good. That means you're doing the right thing. I think if
Thank
anything,
you.
that always tells me, okay, this is a pretty good path that I'm going on.
How do you see storytelling evolving in the world of artificial intelligence, AI, and so many other softwares?
So how storytelling can or might evolve because of artificial intelligence. Like most of us, right? I don't know exactly. What I do know is the sort of it's like the paint shop has opened up early. You know, it's like I'm not a painter, but in another lifetime I'll learn how to paint. But I think of story a lot in whether it's music or in painting, like a canvas. And so it does feel as if, you're a kid and you say, "Oh, mom or dad, I want to go to the paint store. I want to get a bunch of paints," because they're all of a sudden they've found something that they feel they're good at or they enjoy, and it's not open yet, right? And you're going, "Oh, you see all these beautiful brushes and paints, and you want them." Well, the store opened early, and so for storytellers, I think that this is a time to really challenge ourselves and how can we think about stories in different ways? If we take aside the, will people watch an artificially built character that looks human, right? That's a big story that's come out of Hollywood. Or environments that we know are not real, right? That they have been built within Sora 2 or any of these technologies. I think when we get past that and we just say, okay, fine, right? I'm going to assume that everything's going to be, and we've had experiences through the years, right? We've had where, technology has improved the green screen effect in TV and movies and these sorts of things. So we understand it. We have a history with it. But when we get past that, then it's about how can we connect emotionally with people? Because that's the ultimate goal, I think, of a storyteller is can I convey something that is worth conveying? And I do it in a way that is an invitation to share an emotional experience about something that somebody else shares a passion for that I do, if I'm it right, or a story or a narrative or a theme or a scene that I think is as compelling. So I think for some, it's going to get they're going to feel like that kid. They get to go into the paint shop and get all the paints and brushes that they want and different size canvases. And it's going to be incredibly exciting. I think it's potentially going to, I think it's going to scare some people because they're going to think, oh, I have to learn technology on top of this. But I think if we approach it with an open mind, purely from a storyteller's perspective, I think there's great opportunity to think about what we can do. I mean, this to me it's of a very different magnitude. But like when YouTube came out, we didn't realize, wait a minute. Oh, look at Justin Bieber. Like, look at all the singers that were discovered through YouTube, recording themselves at home and all of a sudden blasting out to the world. When I was growing up, we didn't have that. That was not a part of the ecosystem. You either were discovered or you moved somewhere where you could be discovered. It wasn't from the comforts of your home and a sort of a camera on a computer. It just didn't happen. So this is going to open up opportunities to tell stories in different ways and to transport people to different lands, I think, that can be visually and auditorially beautiful and rich in expression and experience. So, I guess time will tell, but I'm trying to have an open mind about it and to think, gosh, what if I could take the words, because I love words, I love the rhythm of words, and if I could apply that to scenes that could be developed for me from a visual perspective, okay, what's the result? Is it just a hobby or am I stumbling upon something that's really compelling for someone like me? I don't know.
Yeah, I like that. And what is the biggest advice would you provide for entrepreneurs as far as storytelling and how to define your story? What key points to keep in mind when you telling your story so it will be very interesting and catchy?
I guess my approach to that question might be a little bit off center from what you directly asked, but here's what I would say. I think, and this ties into the AI piece. There are so many industries and people that are or will be affected in the short term, with long term consequences about the careers they choose or the paths that they take. and the steps that they feel that they have to take to get to the next sort of platform of accomplishment. And so, what's the one thing that they can control, though, is their story. Now, the challenge is so many entrepreneurs of all shapes and sizes and companies and their lineage of how they've grown over time. Oftentimes, the story was the last thing that was thought of, right? I mean, how many innovators out there think about their marketing or their communications or the story, really, and what they're telling until they're finished with their product or their solution, or right? They don't oftentimes tell the story along the way, the journey, the path. And so my question to the most of them is, okay, well, if you live in a world where whatever you thought was innovative yesterday is not today, then what are you going to do? You're going to have to lean into your story. You're going to have to be able to talk about that so that you can apply the approach, the discipline, the innovation, the thinking, the strategy, the assembling of talent, capital, all of that, and pile that in and then craft and write a story about why then you provide value in a new world, right? I mean, we are entering into a brand new world. And so I think I don't know if it's ever more important now, but boy, is it important now to understand where your story is. And it's not just that. The one thing I think that's a benefit, years ago, I mean, forever, it was always you worked at one place, 30 years, whatever it was. Now it's seen as a benefit when you have multiple experiences because you're rounding sort of yourself out and the talent that you're developing and curating over time and then applying to whatever position or place you're in. That's all great, right? And if you pull stories along the way, I think you're going to have more valuable contributions that people will be accepting of and wanting to receive, and then incorporate you into these new worlds. But I think it's really, really important to start thinking about that story because it's going to be told. It's like I go back to that beginning thing with the book, right? It's are you in control of your story, and if not, who is? And I think people have to take an active approach to it, engage with their story, and understand where the value propositions are, where the chapters lie that you have to dust off.
So true. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, for sharing your insights. Where can our listeners find you, your social handles, and where they can purchase your book?
Oh, well, thank you. So you can go anywhere where you buy books. So it's The Narrative Edge, authentic storytelling that meets the moment. All my handles are Dr. Rod Berger, Berger, in the spelling. And, my website's the same. You can go there so you can click on whatever bookstore you like to use. But I appreciate people taking the time not only to listen to or watch our episode, but to take the time to check out my book. And a shout out to 11 Films who put my official book trailer together. They are incredibly talented folks out in Oregon, and they made me look a heck of a lot cooler than I think I am. But that book trailer is on Amazon. If you go to Amazon and you look for the book, halfway down you'll see that trailer that I think paints a picture about the world that I have been a part of, and in my efforts to help to tell the stories that have come before me. So,
Thank you so much. Thank you for being my guest.
thank you.